Now, when the Volt was introduced back in 2011, it was widely responsible for changing the public image of General Motors. This was a company that a lot of people associated with building gas-guzzling oil tankers, and it showed America that if the company put their mind to it, they could build a phenomenal EV vehicle. Today I'm taking a look at the all-new second generation. Let's take a look and see if GM was able to address some of the faults of the original model. Now, when the first generation Volt was first introduced, it was a pretty important vehicle for the company. It was one of the first new products to come out from GM post-bankruptcy, and it was really designed to change the image of the company and show America that they were refocused on building us competitive and fuel-efficient vehicles in order to change their image. Now, the first generation Volt was certainly a sales success for Chevrolet. It easily became one of the best-selling plug-in hybrid vehicles or electric vehicles in the States. Now, one thing that I want to point out is they really do not like you to call this a hybrid vehicle, so excuse me actually referring it to a hybrid. This is really a full electric plug-in vehicle with an onboard motor generator. That's basically what the 1.5 liter engine serves as for the Chevrolet Volt. Now you can see for this all-new second generation, the Volt is definitely a more traditional looking car. The original Volt certainly had a very traditional electric vehicle or alternative vehicle shape. They really shaped it off obviously after the one of the vehicle's main competitors, the Toyota Prius. For this all-new second generation, the company was looking to make this a lot more competitive, or at least a lot more traditional and sleek in its design. And Chevrolet really paid attention to a lot of first generation Volt owners. They asked owners what was wrong with the car and what they wanted to improve, and they took that to heart in designing this all new second generation. You can see that the look of the new 2016 Volt is certainly very sleek. Actually, a lot of you, when this vehicle was first introduced earlier last year at the Detroit Auto Show, says it looks a lot like the 9th generation Honda Civic, and you wouldn't be wrong. Actually, I think it looks very similar to the 2012 to 2014 Honda Civic, especially in the front end. The headlights have a traditional swept back look to them. They're a very sleek look. The grille certainly is there for aerodynamics. It kind of looks like a blend of the Acura Beak grille with the Honda Civic front end. Now, again, that's really up to your taste. I think it looks very handsome. I think it looks a lot better than the current generation, the all-new redesigned Toyota Prius for its more controversial design. I prefer this more traditional sleekness of the all-new Volt. Now, the Volt still is based on the Chevrolet Cruze platform. This is the all-new Cruze, of course. The Cruze is just redesigned as well for the 2016 model year. And you can really tell in the size of this car. It's about the same size as most of your everyday compact cars, about 180 inches in overall length, 110-inch long wheelbase. So it does have a longer wheelbase versus a Prius, which is about 3 inches shorter versus this all-new Volt. Now, my particular tester is the top-of-the-line Premier. It comes with these optional, or these standard 17-inch bright machine-finished wheels versus the different design on the LT, the lower LT trim. Coming around the rear, you also see a lot of Honda Civic design reference to the taillights, which have slightly different finish, but the same overall shape as the 2012 Honda Civic when that was first introduced back then. But overall, I think the Volt certainly looks striking. It certainly has a very traditional look to it. And of course, with any hybrid or at least electric vehicle, it has to have a very nice coefficient of drag. This, in which Chevy claims, is basically around 0.27, I believe. So it's still a very efficient car in the wind. And of course, the tires are low rolling resistant tires with some aerodynamic wheels. So, I mean, overall, the Volt certainly looks very appealing, and it certainly will appeal to those who prefer a more traditional looking sedan shape that doesn't stand out as much as a Prius or a C-Max would in this competitive space. But overall, let's take a look at the interior and see a lot of the changes that Chevrolet has made for this all-new second generation. Now, first approaching the new Volt, one thing I really like about it is every model comes standard with GM's push-button start and intelligent access key. It's a new key fob. I'm liking that GM has replaced that traditional old switchblade key with a much more premium-looking fob. Now, remote start is actually standard even on the base LT model, but of course my premium or my Premier model already comes with it. To lock the vehicle, you just push this button here. That locks the doors. To unlock it, you have to actually touch the button. There's no sensor on the back, and that unlocks the doors for you. Now, at first glance, this all-new interior is very striking in this Volt. If you guys remember the first generation Volt, it had that strange-looking white plastic with the touch-sensitive, or the buttons, that just looked very futuristic, but it also looked a little bit on the cheap side. GM has completely, or Chevrolet, as I should say, has completely elevated this interior, and it looks very Cadillac-like, to be honest, especially in this top trim model. My tester is the iridescent pearl white paint. It's a very nice-looking color. It's $1,000 extra. It pairs very nice with the brandy black leather interior that gives you the nice contrast. And overall, I think it certainly will draw a lot of buyers in. This is a very premium looking environment. Now, stepping inside the Volt, of course, with the lower roof line, you do have to duck your head because of that slippery shape that the company was going for. But shutting the door, it has a pretty nice solid thunk, and you can hear every time you get in the car, it gives you that little welcome greeting noise. It's a nice little gimmick, I guess. Now, of course, as I said, push button start is standard. It has a nice blue button here that matches with the weird blue finish on the shifter, but I do like how it's a traditional shifter. And all you have to do to start it, put your foot on the brake, and then push the power button here to fire it up. Now, of course, this doesn't have a traditional engine starter noise because it's an electric car. Instead, what you're hearing is just a bunch of whirring noises, and then, of course, you know it's ready when it actually says ready down there. That tells you that the car is ready to be driven, and that's really your only indication. There is no engine startup noise, of course. Now, the one thing you're going to immediately notice are the two screens. They look fantastic. I'm really impressed with the renderings and the graphics of both screens. They look very upscale and nice. Now, looking at the rest of the interior materials here, you can see they're very nice looking, especially the plastics in here. Now, even though the plastics are hard touch plastic variety, the graining is very low gloss. It has a nice high quality look to the graining. It goes very nicely with the bright finishes here that break up the the low gloss plastics in the dash. And GM typically has a tendency to go a little bit too garish in some of the shininess in here, but I think it actually works very well in this car for the first time. So I'm liking to see the company is holding a little bit of restraint, or showing a little restraint when it comes to their interior designs. The door panel, also hard touch plastic from the dashboard, but it is leather padded right here where your elbows are going to rest, so a nice place for your armrest. The window is automatic up down for the driver only. I kind of wish they made it for the passenger as well, but I'm kind of just griping there. Nice chrome door handle here. The window switches, they feel a little bit nicer. They look a little different than what you find in the traditional or older GM products. The turn signal stock and windshield wiper stock are also new. I like how they are using a newer design, so it's nice to see GM completely starting to change some of the parts bin stuff that they use in their interiors. Now, looking at the center stack here, it's very beautiful looking. In fact, that 8-inch Chevrolet MyLink is the latest version, of course, and it basically looks like there is an iPad mounted on the dash, but it doesn't have that tacky to aftermarket look that you might find in some competing vehicles, so I'm liking what Chevrolet has done. Now, of course, this is the Chevrolet MyLink system. It does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. That's what the projection screen is for. When you have it plugged into your USB, it'll basically project what's on your phone onto the screen. You guys have seen Apple CarPlay before. It's a very wonderful system. Now, you can see it's traditional Chevrolet MyLink stuff here. You do have another area here where you have your voice text messaging service. OnStar with this vehicle does have 4G LTE, rolling hotspot, and then of course your live traffic. Now, looking at the rest of the infotainment screen here, you can see the responsiveness is pretty damn good. GM has done a really good job with improving Chevrolet MyLink. Going to your audio sources here, of course, you do have your traditional sources. You have your XM, AM, FM, Bluetooth streaming, Pandora as well. I mean, everything you pretty much expect, and you can see the touch response is pretty good. I really like the fact that GM has listened to their customers and have addressed the earlier Chevrolet MyLinks, which were pretty slow. Now, looking at the navigation function here, you can see this is just your traditional GM nav head unit. It is a $500 option on this Premier model. It's supposed to work like a tablet. Again, you can scroll, you can pinch, you can zoom, you can swipe. It works pretty well. Still a little bit on the laggy side. Some of you may not prefer a touchscreen, but some of you may do. Honestly, I think in the Volt it works. I like the fact that they do give you this nice touchscreen that is within easy reach. Now, going back to the home screen here, there is a nice energy monitor here that shows you a beautiful representation or rendering of where the power is going. You can see there's the 1.5 liter generator, there's the electric motor, and then there's the battery level. It gives you a nice flow of energy when you are driving the vehicle. I'll show you guys that later on in the test drive, of course. Now, you might notice a couple of other icons here. You can adjust the charging time for this vehicle. You can basically plan a charging time if you need to, and you can also change the amps of the charging. For those of you who need a faster charge, there is a maximum of 12 amperage or a reduced 8 if you need to do so. Now, looking at the rest of the center stack here, you can see there's lots of buttons here, and they're pretty well labeled. Your automatic climate control is down here. Very nice volume knob here. There is a no tuning knob, but there are some nice buttons. Now, coming to the center stack here, you're going to notice a couple of things. A traditional shifter, for one. I love the fact that there is a traditional shifter in this vehicle. It controls the continuously variable transmission, and then of course when you put the vehicle in reverse, you do have a nice backup camera with distance markers, trajectory, and then front and rear parking sensors. So that's very nice to have when you're trying to park this vehicle. Another thing you're going to notice, some more buttons here. This is the mode selector button here for the drive modes. When you push this button here, you can cycle between normal, sport, mountain mode, of course, is for when you're driving on hills. And then of course there's a hold function here. The hold button function, what that does is it actually locks out the vehicle from using any power that's in the battery. So if I wanted to hold the vehicle at that 38 miles of electric range, it'll freeze the battery so it won't take any power from there, and then it'll just take power from the engine. So essentially it'll leave the engine running, and the engine will create energy for the battery to use instead of taking it from the battery that's storing the 38 miles of range. Now, a couple other buttons you're going to notice. There's a stability control off switch here, your parking sensor off switch, and then this button here controls the automatic parallel parking function, perpendicular and parallel. It's standard on the Premier models. When you have the vehicle in drive, and then you push this button, the vehicle will start searching for a spot, and when it finds a spot, it'll tell you, and then it'll take control of the wheel, and you basically have to just work the brakes. You've seen this before. A lot of other manufacturers offer it as well. Now, looking at the rest of the cabin here, there is a nice glove box here, which is nicely large. It is damped, not lined with felt, but it's good storage. There's more storage right here. Good coupled here. A nice little place for your sunglasses. Right there. And then of course, looking here, there is a wireless charging pad here. It's standard, and then more storage in here. So I mean, overall, in terms of practicality, this vehicle definitely still excels as a daily driver. The seats are also, I think they're pretty comfortable. I really like the contrasting stitching. There is no power seat option on any trim. Even my high trim still comes with manual seats. I would like to see GM offer that. And then of course, there's also no sunroof option available on this vehicle. That's something I personally like, but GM feels that they don't need to offer it on this particular one. I hope they do change that soon. Overall, I am, again, really impressed with the cabin of the all-new Volt. It certainly impresses me with its quality, with its high luxury or high-end look. It's certainly much more appealing to me versus what you find in some of its competitors like the C-Max and the Prius. Now, looking at the rear seat of the Volt, this is probably the biggest weakness of this vehicle, especially when you compare it to its main competitors from Toyota and Ford. The rear seat room is definitely on the tight side. In fact, Chevy did add a 5th seat option in this vehicle. The old first generation Volt didn't only sat 4. This one still technically only seats 4, although there is a seat belt now, so legally you could put somebody in the middle. You just probably wouldn't like them because there's no headroom and there's no legroom. But of course, stepping inside the rear seat, this is really low right here, so I'm pretty short. I have to duck my head pretty badly to get into this vehicle without basically the roof taking my head off. But shutting the door, Once you actually get back here, the space isn't bad. There's good foot space underneath the front seats, and you know, for shorter trips, I wouldn't mind this. But again, I definitely wouldn't want to sit in the middle here, as this cup holder console takes up all the space. So the middle passenger will be straddling this and very uncomfortable because the seat itself is a little bit higher up. Now, you do get heated rear seats, thankfully. That is standard on the Premier. It's available on the LT model as part of a comfort package. But looking at the rest of the interior, it is hard touch plastic, of course, and it's slightly padded here, but it's not leather. It's just some kind of cheap vinyl material here. So rear seat is a little bit shafted. So if you guys expect to use this as a family vehicle, you better hope your friends or your kids are small, because they probably wouldn't like sitting back here too much. But you do have a nice armrest here where your cup holders are right there. There's not really much in terms of storage, but you do have dual map pockets, and then a place where you can, I guess, put your phone if you guys are riding in the back seat. Now, looking at the cargo area of the Volt, this is a hatchback, even though the new one has more of the shape of a sedan. So it does give you that practicality aspect, as you can pack your stuff a little bit higher. There's a nice cargo cover here. You can see my camera equipment pretty much takes up all the space back here. Chevy rates it at 10.8 cubic feet of space, which is not bad. The Prius and the C-Max, of course, do give you more, but the seats do fold down 60/40. Really, the reason why you don't see a lot of space is because the batteries are underneath the floor here, and they take up a lot of room. Now, Chevy has given you a nice area here where you can put the charging cord. All you have to do is just open this here, and then open that. Your charging cord stores neatly right in there. So they have reduced the size of the charging cord just to make it a little bit more, you know, easy for you guys to hide it away in the cargo area. Now, accessing the charging port for the Volt's pretty easy. It's right here on the driver's side, and just push it right there to open it, and then it pops right open. You know, your traditional charging port for any other electric vehicle. The vehicle does come with a level 1 charger as standard, and then if you guys need the level 2 charger, you will have to have it installed at your home. Now, underneath the hood of the Volt, you're actually hearing the engine running. This is a rare thing. You really don't hear the engine running, but I've left it in its hold mode here, and it's coming on to recharge the batteries and power the electronics. Now, you can see this is the Voltec powertrain in the Volt. It's an updated gasoline motor generator. It's a 1.5 liter with direct injection now, up from the 1.4 that was in the previous model. It's still a 4-cylinder motor. It produces roughly about 100 horsepower, 101 horsepower on its own, but of course it's not supposed to power the front wheels. It just serves as a generator. Now, a sandwich between this motor is a 18.4 kilowatt hour electric motor. That produces a combined 149 horsepower, so about 150. Torque is really where it's at, and this makes about 20 more pound-feet of torque versus last year's. It produces about 293 pound-feet of torque. Last year it was about 273. Horsepower remains the same at 149 combined, which is more than a Prius, of course. Now, Chevy rates this new Volt to go about 53 miles on electric power, on the battery alone. When that runs out, you will get about another 350 or so miles of range from the gasoline generator. Combined, they're saying about 420 miles of range. So again, this is ideally one of the most perfect, or at least in terms of on paper, vehicles for a commuter car, because most people probably don't drive over 50 miles in terms of what they go to and from with work. So you could technically get away with not using any gas in your daily commute. Now, when you do use the gas engine, it's rated at 43 in the city, 42 on the highway, about 42 combined. So it is better versus the 37, I believe, in the previous generation. Now, this all runs through a CVT transmission. It weighs a little bit less than the old one, about 200 pounds lighter versus the 2015 model. So the performance has improved. Chevy says about an 8.5 0 to 60 performance time. But let's get on the road and see how it all works together, shall we? So for the driving portion, the first thing I'm going to notice when I first get inside the Volt is the driving position seems a little off for me. There is like a 6-way manual adjustable seat, but for some reason I feel the pedals are a little too close. That's just me, especially the dead pedal. I think it's a little positioned too far forward where it kind of makes my foot feel like this. So it's a little uncomfortable to rest at, but I would recommend just sitting in the Volt and just trying it, making sure the driving position works for you. You did hear, of course, that slightly weird electric whirring noise that makes that little chime when you first start up, so it does make you realize that you are driving a different car, but when you first initially set off, the car feels pretty much like a normal car. And you know, it's been a while since I drove a Volt. I briefly drove the first generation when it first came out. I was impressed with it. There were definitely a couple of griefs with it. This new one certainly is really impressive, and I'm very happy to see, you know, Chevy make these big improvements and really listen to a lot of Volt owners of the first generation to address some of the issues of the old model. And you know, every time I drive these electric cars, that little whirring noise is such a comical thing to hear. It puts a smile on my face. Just listen to it. Whee! That's literally what it's doing. It's like, whee! It's just like an overgrown golf cart. So really, even though I love the sound of a big burly V8 or twin turbo V6, these electric cars, even though they may not be very fast on paper, when you actually get behind the wheel, they're incredibly fun to drive. And those of you who have never driven one, I highly recommend to do so. And when you really put your foot down, this car will spin the front tires because it has a lot of torque. And one thing about electric cars is there's basically 294 pound-feet of torque at 0 RPM, and you really feel it the moment you stab the throttle. But anyways, this car certainly drives like a traditional car. I mean, one thing that Chevy really got down right is the ride quality. I mean, all those batteries in the back seat, this car rides like a cloud. It soaks up the bumps really well. It's really quiet, really smooth, and it just really works if you guys are planning to just drive this as your everyday commuter car. And it's using 120 kilowatts of power. My foot is to the floor, and this car will basically get to 60 in 8.5 seconds, what GM claims. I've seen it as quick as 7.5 when Motor Trend tested this car, and honestly, it feels a lot quicker from behind the wheel. You'll be surprised at just how much torque and just pull this vehicle has. And one thing about it, compared to the Prius, you didn't hear any engine noise, and that's the one thing I like about the Volt, is the gas engine does not kick in when you have battery charge. I mean, this car has it's about half full right now, the battery. It's giving me 26 miles of range, and I can floor it, and there's no annoying engine drone. It just is whoosh, it just goes, and that's what I really like about this car. Now, if you guys want the engine to come on, you can engage the hold mode here, and that'll force the gas engine to turn on. It'll save the battery power that I have currently stored in the batteries right now, and it'll just use power created from the engine. Now, the Volt is a pretty interesting car to drive in that the steering is actually really good. It is an electric power steering, of course, but it has decent feel, decent weight. The Volt feels pretty nimble. It's relatively fun to drive. Of course, the eco-minded tires are going to limit you on what you can actually do, but you know, add that with the nice ride quality, the quietness in here, you know, the nice handling characteristics. This outhandles the Prius, the old Prius at least. I haven't had a chance to drive the new one, but this car is definitely a lot more solid feeling. It feels much more sharp than the old Prius, but I'll have to wait until I drive the new one to give you guys my feedback on that. Now, I have it in hold mode now, and you can hear, when I put my foot down, you do hear a little bit of that gas engine. I'll give you another acceleration run in hold mode so you guys can hear how loud it is. But overall, in terms of driving, you know, pleasure, this thing is relatively good. Now you can hear, getting up to highway speeds, there are certain times where the gas engine and the electric motor will work together. The gas engine will provide a little bit of a boost, especially during certain conditions. So this is where the vehicle will function like a hybrid, but not. It's rare when it actually does this. Now you can hear, going at 60 miles an hour, the road noise in here is basically what you mostly hear. There's very little wind noise. I'm going to put it back into its electric mode, take it off of hold mode, so the gas engine will actually shut off again. And really, this thing is eerily quiet. The seats, once I got used to the driving position, are relatively supportive. There's really good visibility in here. Of course, my tester does have a couple of options on it. It has a driver confidence 1 and 2 package, so that gives me blind spot monitoring. It gives me active lane keeping assist, where this vehicle will actively stay in the lane for me. When I start to go over, it'll actually steer itself back into the lane. It also has automatic emergency braking with a passive alert system, so it has a red light that'll flash if you're going to rear end the person in front of you. One thing it is missing is adaptive cruise control. GM realized that, and they added it for the 2017 model year, so you guys can actually pick up the 17s, I believe this month. They just started going on sale because the 16 was released in a limited availability, so those of you who go for the top of the line will have it. Now, one thing that GM did take from the Cadillac ELR with this new one is what they call regen on demand. There's a little paddle behind the left steering wheel over here. When you push it, it actually will brake the vehicle. I'm not actually touching the brakes. It actually will give you the most efficient regen possible, and it hits the brakes for you. You can see on the display it's recapturing that lost kinetic energy, and it puts it right to the battery. You can also see on the display right here where it shows you where the energy is going. So it's a really nice function. Actually, I found it very useful when you're stuck in traffic. It will not actually bring the vehicle down to a complete stop, but those of you who want to, wow your passengers, just push this little left paddle here, and it starts to give you the regenerative braking. Now, of course, the Volt is a pretty impressive vehicle. And in fact, for me, I feel like it would be the perfect commuter car for most Americans. I mean, you theoretically could drive this vehicle to and from work and not use any gas as long as your round trip commute is less than 50 miles. Now, speaking of the range, now, I've actually only seen this at full charge show me about 41 miles of range. Now, when you do drive this very efficiently, the range will go up. So I have no doubt in my mind this vehicle could get close to that 50 miles, 53 miles of range, just because I've tested it where I've reset the trip and I've seen how many miles it actually goes down and where it shows what's remaining. It's relatively close, so I'm impressed that Chevy was able to improve the range, especially the old Volt was only able to get about 38 miles of range. This new one is certainly much improved. Now, the gas engine is rated at 42 mpg. Now, that's something I haven't really been able to test. The few times that I did leave it in its hold mode, the engine, I see how efficient the engine runs. I've driven the vehicle about 200 miles. It's sitting at 3/4 of a tank of gas. It's used about 1/4 of a tank of gas. So really, the gas engine is just there, again, as a generator. So those of you who do plan on owning this vehicle, I'd recommend, just keeping it in hold mode and seeing what kind of MPG you're gonna get. I know the old Volt wasn't able to get the EPA ratings of around 38. This new one with direct injection, it's lighter, it's much more efficient. I see it getting closer to that 42 mile per gallon range when you guys are running on the gas engine alone. Now, regarding the price of the Volt, this is another area where Chevy kind of missed the mark with the first generation. The first one started over $40,000, I believe, which was a lot of money for a vehicle that was based on a Chevrolet Cruze. The company realized that in the coming years they reduced the price significantly. I believe it was in 2014 is when they really reduced the price by like $7,000 or $5,000. This new Volt is actually $1,200 cheaper versus the 2015 model. This new one starts at around $33,000 for the base LT. Now, my tester, of course, is the Premier model. It's about $4,500 more. It starts at around $38,000, and then mine has a couple of extra options. The Driver Confidence 1 package for $500, that gives you blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert. The Driver Confidence 2 package throws in some of that active driver assistance tech like lane keeping assist, automatic emergency braking, intelligent automatic high beams. That's another $500, really a steal, to be honest. My tester also has nav for another $500, so $1,500 in options. All in, mine's about $40,800, which honestly isn't that bad. And don't forget about the federal tax credit that you get in certain states and from the government when you do purchase this vehicle. But of course, you have to be one of the first ones to actually get that credit. That credit will go away once, I believe, GM sells a certain number of Volts, especially this new one. So with all that said, I'm pretty impressed with the all-new Volt. It is probably the most impressive of the EV vehicles I've tested in the last couple of years. I prefer it over the Nissan Leaf. I prefer it over the C-Max and Fusion plugins. I haven't driven the Ford is planning to refresh those. But overall, I really feel this is much better versus the previous generation Prius. I'll have to say reserve judgment on the new one until I get my hands on it to drive and show you guys what that one's like to drive. But if you guys are looking for a commuter car that has the potential basically to not use any fuel if your commute is less than 50 miles, the Volt is really one of the most impressive vehicles. Add in its very impressive technology, this really luxuriously appointed cabin, and sleek styling. And it's no reason, I have no doubt that Chevy will basically be selling these as fast as they can build them. But anyways, if you guys are looking to see the latest cars I am testing, make sure you follow me on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and as always, keep subscribed to the YouTube channel so I can bring you guys all the latest vehicle reviews. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you all in the next video.